Hey, everybody. Welcome to A Bad Takes episode 5. I'm your host, one of your hosts, co-host, really. Name's Joe Payne. Go by Political Payne here on the internet. Always joined by J. Andrew World right about now on Twitter. How you doing, Andy? How are you doing today? For our
I'm
fifth episode, we're doing it.
fifth episode. Yeah, this
Wow.
is great. I'm doing pretty good. I did want to talk about a couple things that are going on
Yes.
before we get started.
And really quick, we're going to be talking primary colors with our guests, and we'll introduce them in a moment, but you have a little housekeeping there. Go for it.
Yeah, well, first up, just we need to show solidarity, and I don't know quite how we're doing this just yet, but be aware that one of the largest strikes since World War II is about to start with the International Alliance for Theatrical Stage Employees. I believe they pronounce their union AITSI. I
Mhm.
could be wrong by that, but I was hearing some pros talk about it, and that's how they were saying it, or something close to that.
Okay.
Anyways, these are the guys who make movies happen. They're not the directors. They're not the actors. They're not they run the boom microphones. They
Yeah.
do lots of really hard work. There is a phenomenal no, what Instagram account where you can actually hear these horror stories because built into Hollywood budgets is they actually build in to pay fines when they break union rules, so these people don't get to eat on time and things like
Wow.
that. So
Jeez.
yeah, no, it is absolutely brutal hard work. They love it. I know there is a bit of solidarity among the more out there people, you know,
Hmm.
uh, which is good to see. But we need to see more. We need to show solidarity. I'm not quite sure if the strike has actually started yet. I just know that things weren't looking good last time I checked.
Hmm.
Um, so just be aware of that and figure out a way to show solidarity with these people. Um, the
Yep.
second thing I really did want to bring up is my friend Jerry Kraft. He's a cartoonist, did the long running Mama's Boys comic strip that you might have seen in your newspapers back in the 90s and 2000s. Um, he's the black cartoonist who's not the guy who does the Boondocks.
Okay.
That was always the joke. I remember the first time we met, he made the joke, and I go, "Oh, I love." I said the other one. There's like three.
Boondocks.
No, not Boondocks, the third one, and
Mm.
he just burst out laughing. But no, we've been published together in APB, Artists Against Police Brutality, and he's
Oh,
been
cool.
doing YA graphic novels, which is fantastic. And he's going to schools, and since the pandemic, he's not doing them in person, but he's going to be
Hmm.
doing a Zoom call into a classroom and talked to about 30 kids about his book. And one of the parents is extremely triggered, and she's trying to cancel him, and
Wow.
so she's started a petition, and if there's any kind of counter protest, I reported the petition to change.org as being offensive.
Okay.
I don't know,
And you
as
said
far as I
she's saying he's teaching critical race theory. It's obviously politically motivated, right?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
politically motivated. I mean, and the thing is, it's like Jerry's doing comics from from his life experience, and they're
Hmm.
absolutely fantastic. New Kid is the his award-winning graphic novel. If check that out if this sounds interesting to you, and stay tuned to our Twitter, because we'll probably if there's any kind of movement on either of these things, any type of organizing that's being done, I will try to get the word out to you guys. So stay tuned.
Yeah. Well, let's hesitate no longer to welcome on our guest. Thank you for sharing that stuff with us, Andy. But we have Anders Lee and Branko Marcetic. How are you both doing? Take a moment, Anders, first to introduce yourselves. And I guess you could give us a quick take, maybe a couple words on primary colors, what your quick take from it is.
Hi, Edersley here. I'm a correspondent on TV's Redacted Tonight and a podcaster as well on Pod Damn America. And it's hard for me to be objective about this one because I first saw it when I think I was 13. And honestly, from a film perspective, Mike Nichols, I just realized upon rewatching it that it was written, the screenplay anyway, was written by Elaine May, which I didn't realize at first. So, artistically, I think I would give it a thumbs up.
All right.
And I'm Branko Marcetic. I am a staff writer with Jackman Magazine, and I think my main takeaway from watching this movie is that it hits a lot different in the kind of post-Trump or post-2016 era. But I'll save my reasons for that, for the actual show.
All right. Well, this is the actual show, but I understand understand what you're saying. Anders, I share a similar experience with this. I remember it being on when I was a child, but it was like at a house where my parents were hanging out, and that was the adult thing going on. So I was like coming in and out of the room, but I remember specific moments of this film. And I mean, we should probably clear the air right away. Like this film's about Bill Clinton, right? It's about the Clintons without the character being Bill Clinton. I mean, does anybody just have thoughts on that? The Clintonianism or Clintonesque nature of the whole damn thing from the beginning. That they kind of narrow in the very opening is that whole thing. How does he shake your hand, and how does he put the attention on you? And everybody focuses on Bill Clinton as this character who, how did he make people personally feel? And you see that's a big theme in this film.
Yeah. Do you know the backstory behind the book? So it was originally a novel that came out in, I believe, 1996, and it was anonymously authored. And people didn't know who it was at first. And eventually, I think through his handwriting, someone discovered that it was columnist Joe Klein, extreme, radically moderate Joe Klein, self-identified. And so he came out and he copped to it, but he insisted, and I think this is for legal reasons, but he and the publisher insisted that they did the old refrain, like the characters are based on the characters. This is any likeness in real life is coincidental. I mean, they were basically saying that, which is sort of absurd, considering how close to Bill Clinton this movie is. But yeah, it is from somebody who at least reported on Bill Clinton. So I think it's safe to say that this is Clinton.
Yeah, I mean, one of the funny things about the movie is that like it doesn't even bother to pretend that it's anyone else, really. I mean, there's no possible other person that could be. It hits every single note of Bill Clinton. The voice, the accent, the look, and of course, yes, the Clinton's kind of sociopathic ability to project extreme empathy and care and interest in people without really giving a shit about them at all. So, I mean, that's what I think when I first heard about this movie, decades ago, I thought it was going to be kind of like a subtle satire or a kind of subtle critique, like you might notice a few things here poking fun at Bill Clinton, but when you watch it, it really does not bother to hide, who it's about, I guess, other than the kind of the legalese that Anders mentioned.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, I avoided this movie whenever it came out because it's like, okay, Mike Nichols is a great director. Like, let's address that right there. He's a phenomenal director. He did The Graduate. He's done many great films over the years. He gets great performances out of his actors, and so let's I don't want to take anything away from John Travolta's bizarrely surreal Clinton impression that he did through the whole thing. Like the thing is, though, it's like even in this movie, I as good as the performances were, like Billy Bob Thornton has now built a career around playing James Carville. Or analogs for James Carville, because this is the second movie that I'm aware of.
Right. Yes.
I can't think of the other one, but it's with Sandra Bullock.
Our Brand is Crisis, which is
there we go.
Not to go off on a tangent, but it's based on a documentary about how American consultants going to Bolivia trying to stop Evo Morales in 2002, and then they made a dramatized version a few years later. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, which maybe we'll get to at some point, but it just seems like Billy Bob Thornton has found his niche of playing James Carville.
Right.
I have a lot of feelings and a lot of thoughts about the characters and especially their dialogue. But to give everybody a hint of what we're actually talking about here, I'm going to let's watch the trailer. And let's see. Hopefully, I've done this correctly. Tell me, anybody in the chat, if you can't hear it, but we should be good. So let's hear it.
I've never helped run a presidential campaign before.
Neither have we.
From Mike Nichols, director of The Birdcage, comes the story of a man
I'm gonna do something really outrageous. I'm gonna tell the truth.
who said yes to destiny,
I'm gonna win this thing.
but couldn't say no
Apple fritter?
Honey, please, popcorn.
to anything else.
Governor Jack Stanton seduced me.
No, it is not true.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We've had some tough times in our marriage, but we've worked them out.
Our Jackie's done some pretty stupid things in his life, and he's got enemies.
Well, this has to be handled just right.
Just right.
I'm gonna want a signed confession.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, mister, you're about to become Mrs.
Okay.
Ain't this just great?
Universal Pictures presents John Travolta,
What's he governor of again?
Emma Thompson,
Jack Stanton could also be a great man if he weren't such a thoughtless, disorganized
Slime-sucking.
Psychotic. Get me out! You just threw the phone out the window.
Primary Colors,
Does this guy have a chance in hell?
No.
screenplay by Elaine May.
My God, the sheer 90s of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
Yeah, the thing that was strange to revisit about it is that, and this is true of the novel as well, I was just looking up, the main character is not Bill Clinton or the Bill Clinton stand-in Jack Stanton. It's I forgot the actor's name, but the guy we see at the beginning who says, "I've never run a presidential campaign," who's is black, and nowadays I feel like that would be more of a controversial decision for white writer, white novelist, and then a white screenwriter to take the vantage point of a black protagonist,
and then a British actor too. Like that's another interesting thing. Like he's removed from the American experience of.
Oh, he's British as well. Okay,
That's what I thought.
I don't want to discount the British experience of racism either, because
between him and Emma Watson, you had two British actors playing Americans, and they were doing a really good job concealing their accents, but the Britishness was coming through and just making them sound sort of Ivy League, if you will, in both cases.
Transcontinental.
Yeah.
It really came out. There was a big scene where the main character kind of screams out and, what's it all for? Gets all upset and has his emotional moment. But I guess what kind of, I don't know, threw me off a lot was just how pressing this theme was of how he's kind of selling his soul to do this, and there, I mean, we'll get more into the character and his development. But I don't know if that dynamic, I thought about it a little bit, but then I also just thought that's just what they were doing in the 90s. And it does seem like they're kind of shoehorning everybody else in that they can, you know what I mean, to play off of this actor like Kathy Bates or Billy Bob or whoever else.
And Kathy Bates was fantastic in this.
Well, Kathy Bates is always good, right? I mean, they had an amazing cast for this movie. What is fun to me watching that trailer is that I feel like the trailer hits the tonally what the movie should have been more than it was. The movie itself is kind of caught between being this earnest film about, I guess, how politics corrupts people and how it makes them do very terrible things, and how it turns otherwise good people into kind of very cynical, ambitious people. But then it's also at the same time this wacky screwball comedy where you have these very broad characters. Part of the plot is that when the main character, whose name I've forgotten, takes over the campaign, it's this I mean, to call it shambolic doesn't really even describe it. It's a campaign that's made up of approximately about 20 people. Half of them apparently have never done anything to do with campaigns. They have to be taught how to hand out flyers, how to use a computer, that kind of thing. And it's all played for these very broad, over the top laughs, but it doesn't really. And then it's sort of contrasted with this attempt at the same time to say, well, this is a really serious exploration of what politics does to people. And I feel like the trailer is actually what, in some ways what the movie should have been, which is this kind of like very wacky, big kind of piece of comedy.
Yeah, it certainly had a lot of characters who were definitely over the top. So that's an interesting point that didn't always mesh with the rest of the tonality. But I'm curious what you guys think about the fact that the main character is black, because to me, it kind of seemed like a commentary on Bill Clinton through the eyes of, I don't know if he was a stand-in for Black America or the left or the 60s or something like that.
It didn't seem like they were unaware of it. I mean, especially it seemed like in the first opening exposition part of the movie, as we're getting to know this main character, that was like they were being very clear about the Democratic Party and the way, politicians like these would view, black senators, black voters, and what they would be to their coalition. For a second, I started thinking, like, is this a weird, like, are they really making it on the nose where it is about like Bill Clinton's appeal to Black America? That's why they've cast this main character. But I also think, I don't know, they made a weird thing out of the dichotomy of this character being like Ivy League educated, even like Kathy Bates calls him privileged at one point, which like talk about like being ahead with the discourse, you know what I mean? So in some ways I feel like they're handling that a little bit, like playing hot potato with it. I don't know, but how deep it goes into it. What I think is interesting is that much like the 90s, there's hardly any policy here. It's all very vague and appeals to, Social Security and this and this and that. They almost make a joke out of the guy who wants to talk policy.
Well, Stanton kind of does the thing where the classic Clintonian thing where you have this kind of populist who's railing against the fat cats in debate, and then you have the guy who's more, I guess, the classical kind of conservative Democrat candidate, and then Stanton kind of dances in between, where he says, well, I care about the deficit, but I also think that we should not cut Social Security. And that's basically, it's a good summation of kind of the upper limits of political prospects in the 90s. Is that's what you would get.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I think in that scene too, one of his opponents asks him, like, well, you can't be for everything, right? And then his staff thinks this is a big blow, but then he manages to twist it around and be like, hey, I'm for solutions, and if you got solutions, I'm going to use them.
Oh boy, let me tell you what, buddy. I was going to say, I think I might have tweeted this earlier. Like, I didn't even know either Anders or Branko's your Bill Clinton impressions, but I know myself and anybody else included, we're gonna have better Bill Clinton impressions than John Travolta's. I mean, what like, guys, give me your, was John Travolta really ready to do this? You know what I mean? Did Scientology prepare him enough for this moment? Is it enough to just be like the horn dog and have the rage scene where you blow up? And you know what I mean? Like
I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I'm comparing it to Clive Owen, who's now portraying him now in the American Crime Story, and Dennis Quaid in another incredible that it even got made movie about Tony Blair and Bill Clinton being friends, the special relationship.
Oh my God!
It's very hard to not do, and I think this is where kind of the comic tone of the movie comes in, because it's hard to do a Bill Clinton impression, and this is true, I guess, of most presidents. It's hard to do an impression of them without making it into a comedy, right? It's just because he's so ridiculous, and trying to imitate this ubiquitous presence in America it's impossible for it to not be comic in some way. I think he did a pretty good job at it, especially if you compare it to the other people who played Clinton.
It was almost like a Saturday Night Live sketch at times, and that was the strength of his impression was the fact that he was able to pull off comedy, and Travolta doesn't often do straight comedy as far as I know. Or at least if he does, I've blocked it from my mind because the only thing I could think of is From Paris with Love.
Oh, right. Was the bald guy?
Yes, on the cocaine, on all the cocaine. All the cocaine.
The Look Who's Talking movies, those were allegedly comedies.
Oh my God.
So, which I think plays into what you're saying.
Hey, Danny DeVito was involved.
The humor wasn't coming from him, though. It was coming from Bruce Willis as the baby.
What?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Am I mixing up movies?
No, Bruce Willis was the baby.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And Kirstie Alley she was not a baby. She was John Travolta's adult.
I thought Look Who's Talking was dogs talking.
No, that's babies.
No, that's part 3.
Oh.
Jesus Christ.
That's when they really decide to shake up the formula.
Gone down a bad movie hole.
Speaking of Travolta, there was one dance scene in this movie, but that's about it. Like Travolta is almost like contractually obliged, and that may actually be true to dance in his movies. But as far as I can remember, there's only one bit in this movie where he does so, and it's very quick, and which I guess they're trying to distance us from the character of Travolta, the actual actor. But I would like to see a little more.
I got to tell a story real quickly to Branko because you're going to love it. I went to high school with a football player named Rocky, and Rocky, we met. We kind of hit it off because I was wearing this is like the 90s, so I'm wearing like a 70s shirt, and I'm just like trying to be like John Travolta, and he's like, John Travolta, best dancing man in the movies.
I mean,
and
he wasn't wrong.
We were friends. And so...
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting that the final scene, I think, is the inaugural ball. So maybe they're shoehorning in some dance scene for Travolta and making it the ultimate part of the movie.
But it wasn't like even from memory, even in the Look Who's Talking movies, or at least one of them, there's like a gratuitous scene where Travolta dances.
I think it's the first one, which is the only good one.
Right, there you go. And so it's almost as if they went out of their way to not do it here. I mean, when was hold on, this was 3-4 years after Pulp Fiction, which really brought him back from the dead, right? So
yeah,
98.
There you go.
Yeah, so I definitely think he didn't go for the full impression, Bill Clinton impression, like, oh boy, let me tell you what, buddy, and all that stuff. But he does that kind of thing where he kind of gets the spirit of Bill Clinton. I guess this is another 90s thing. Like, it was interesting to me how, and like, you're right, they have this, like, there's a lot of really ridiculous depiction of like the ragtag campaign, nobody knows what to do, and all of a sudden they're all whipped into shape and all of that shit. There's a lot of bad 90s movie shit going on here. But also just the focus on the ups and downs of the campaign, not through any policy. Like there is that one, that's the other thing. Sorry, I keep getting like mixed up because there's a lot of like comment, like jokes about Jewishness and anti-Semitism and how the Democratic Party approaches the Jewish community. There's a scene of him in Florida, like pitching like, oh, I support Israel, everybody, and all of that stuff, So, and then we saw a picture of earlier where there's a cameo from Rob Reiner as well. And so you have like that was the most policy I got from this movie, but everything else that they were obsessed with was personal lives, like who he fucked, when he fucked them, and then also isn't this what brings down his rival in the story, right? The guy who ends up being his rival is personal
Larry
stuff.
Hagman. The actor Larry Hagman, which is so nice to see him in anything. I had no clue he was in this movie, so.
I mean, culturally insensitive Tony Shalhoub. Right. All of the
Tony Shalhoub was the kind of go-to if you have any non-white ethnicity that you need an actor to play. Tony Shalhoub was kind of your guy in this period.
That's true. But what do you guys think about that? That just like that focus on the politician's personal life as opposed to what they're actually going to do, what they actually stand for.
I think this is like the precursor to Sorkinism too, if you think about it. The American president, like it's completely about the president's personal life, and the drama at the end of it, like in the last 5 minutes, is coming from the Republican Party, and the show West Wing, like literally is no policy, and what little policy there is in there, it is all atrocious. It is like the most horrifying politics you can come up with, and somehow like this is all part of that milieu too. So and I think also in the 90s it was all about like that saying like politician, what is it, right wingers fall in line, Republicans fall in line, Democrats fall in love, and it's like trying to make you fall in love with John Travolta, with Stanton. And I don't I'll be honest with you, I can't say about anybody else, but I really didn't feel that. I did not feel, like I enjoy John Travolta. He's very charming, but like I did not see that come across.
Well, there's a really telling moment in the movie where, because the whole thing is about how it's not about what will Stanton do, it's about making history. That's what they keep saying. Everyone wants to be part of the campaign to make history, and there is that.
And they're
that
still
scene,
doing that.
Yeah, very much so. But there's a scene where the main character Henry is talking about why he's still sticking with this candidate, even despite the many flaws in his character, and despite the scandals just waiting to blow up. And he talks about how he wants to. The kind of Clinton generation had JFK, right? And he never had that. And he's looking for that JFK. And he says, he wants to feel the kinds of things that the older generation felt when they heard JFK speeches. And he says explicitly, I know it's bullshit with Stanton. And he says, and maybe it was bullshit with JFK as well, but I want to believe that it wasn't. And in many ways, first of all, it very much speaks to the end of history moment that the movie was made in. But then also it relates to, or kind of prefigures that kind of West Wing approach to politics that basically infected the minds of a lot of liberal people, which is that speeches is the only terrain of politics in which you can really contest anymore, and that's seems to be the only reason anyone believes in Stanton. He can give a really good speech. That's really the only positive thing we see in him is when he's speaking.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how uncommon it is in general for a political movie to not go super in-depth on policy, like, because it's just hard to make, a discussion about tariffs or something compelling. But I do think the 90s definitely, and I think a lot of this had to do with how indistinguishable mainstream politics was getting, especially in the mid to late 90s, that there was extra focus on personalities, and much ink spilled on Bill Clinton as a person, and his sexual exploits, of course. But one scene that definitely stuck out to me was, I think it was in New Hampshire, when he's giving a speech to laid off I think mill workers, and he says, he has this line, I wrote it down, that muscle jobs are moving overseas, right? They're not coming back. So what you need to do is build up the muscle between your ears, and that's all the government can really do now. We're not going to be able to bring back good paying manufacturing jobs, but we can figure out a way to retrain you, right? And it's that kind of honesty that inspires people, and I think that might be somewhat tantamount to what Bill Clinton really ran on. But then again, I'm not totally sure.
I literally just watched a bunch of campaign videos right before we came on, and interviews, and like I was watching this long YouTube documentary that was decent enough to because it had like just a lot of primary resources to look at. And a couple of things that like we've forgotten are like Hillary Clinton's Southern accent.
Right.
So like when she was doing
that,
and it was just, just really weird to hear her kind of, draw things out just a little bit. And uh, but the thing is, though, like one of the things that really struck me is that like Pat Buchanan literally ran on the America First, and George W. Bush sounded exactly like Joe Biden.
George H.W. Bush.
George H.W.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
Yes.
I mean, I think Clinton did make that speech, or something tantamount to that speech. Maybe not in a campaign, because that would be suicide possibly. But he did make it, and Obama certainly made it. He told people in the Rust Belt, "Hey, these jobs aren't coming back, so you got to ship up and shape up and stuff." And
learn the code.
Yeah, exactly. No, very much so. And I think the key thing in the movie is that, first of all, the people he's talking to, portrayed somewhat sympathetically, but they're portrayed as let's say simple people. That's the
salt of the earth
euphemism. Yeah, exactly. They're not. These are not the brightest bulbs in the shed or whatever. Very clearly.
And that one woman, you can say shit. We X-rated.
Exactly. And then the key thing is when he tells them this, when he does this very politically courageous thing to tell these people, "Screw you, you're just going to have to do better." They love it.
You the truth.
They love it. He wins them over. The rubes are won over by talking tough to them and telling them they have to get off their asses. So, I mean, that's a really key moment, as you say, Anders.
And that's funny because I'm now remembering in 2008. I'm pretty sure John McCain because I think the people we're talking about have given these speeches, but they're usually after they've been in power for a while. And then they're like, "Oh, by the way, we're not going to get those jobs back." John McCain, I remember in 2008, said in Michigan, most of these jobs aren't going to come back, and we know what happened to him. Because this is kind of like the unspoken reality that the political class really believes very strongly, but they're scared to actually talk to their grubby constituents with the bad news.
Yeah, just to get back to the point about the chief scandal in this movie, and how it's not policy based. It's funny to me because on the one hand, there's an element of kind of metaphor in when Stanton sleeps with the I guess he's not his friend, he's his cook, or he's his favorite Southern restaurateur, I guess. Yeah. He impregnates his teenage daughter, which is obviously a very despicable thing, and it's this huge scandal. And in some ways, that it does kind of call to mind Clinton's kind of use and abuse of African Americans, where he kind of presented himself as being in touch with them, but then also very much just did terrible things for Black communities around the United States in order to win. And but it's funny because the sex scandal is what they choose. But if you wanted to pick a Clinton scandal that I think is far more monstrous than what Stanton does, and that would still kind of would have been a very good kind of episode for the plot. The assassination of Ricky Ray Rector. That to me is kind of the epitome of when I think of Clinton, the lengths that someone is willing to debase themselves and to sell their soul to achieve political power, to actually go and stop your campaign, go and sign off on the execution of a mentally disabled man. That to me is far more indicative than a lot of the stuff that this movie picks of the kinds of lows that and the kinds of the way that character is corrupted by politics, which I think really is what the movie's trying to say, than even the infidelity and that kind of thing, which is central to this movie.
Right, and I was wondering while watching it, these are all Hollywood, people who are probably very friendly with the Democratic Party and with the Clinton administration. He was, the pop culture president and was very friendly with Hollywood.
He was on Arsenio Hall.
Right. So
which is a big deal. Like we don't understand how big Arsenio Hall was. In the 90s, your parents watched Leno or Letterman, and the kids would watch Arsenio.
Yeah. But it made me wonder, why would they make this movie? That's exposing some of Clinton's demons. but they are particular about which demons they're exposing, right? They're talking about the sex scandals because it's too obvious to do an end around, right? He's obviously a philanderer, but they don't really go to the political level of his betrayals of people because I don't think that registers. This is all for a greater good. But in reality, the greater good isn't there.
And even in the movie, the greater good isn't really present. Like, it's never really explained what exactly.
Yeah.
If they all say, "Look, Stanton's not perfect, but he's electable," okay, but then what is he going to do when he gets elected? Right. There's no. The movie doesn't even really try to invest us in any idea of like, okay, well, this is actually worth it. You can see why he sells his soul. Which, I mean, on the one hand, you can maybe criticize the movie for that. Maybe also you could look at it as a kind of quiet or subtle indictment of politics in this era. I don't know. I think you can look at it both ways.
It was also his second term. So they were getting away with things, I think, a little bit. The other thing that tripped me out was they had Kathy Bates's character go full Vince Foster.
Sorry, right. I didn't make that connection. Wow.
That I totally was like, whoa, dude. Like, talk about on the fucking nose. But like, and it's just a weird thing. Like, one thing I found really annoying about Kathy Bates's character was she was this weird like person who existed in the dark underbelly of like smear politics. But I don't go negative. She had this whole like thing like, I have scruples, I have this. And then it just did seem like her mental health stuff was just kind of like shoehorned in there plot wise, because the character doesn't ever come across like she's a person like, who had a severe breakdown. She's just a Kathy Bates character. And then they have that as an out for at the end, she kills herself. And it was all on the principle, like, I can't know the things I know about him and hold blah, 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 blah. It was really weird. You know what I mean? And I wanted to start, I wanted to start conspiracy theories. I wanted to start fucking Rush Limbaugh, there was a trail of blood leading from the car. Like, I wanted to do all of that shit myself when her character did that. I mean, what did y'all think of that?
Emma Thompson was standing there with the gun.
Yeah.
Shot her in the truck, waiting outside of
it just it was just too on the nose for me. It took me out of it really. I was just like, Jesus Christ, like it was in bad taste almost. But
Kathy Bates's character was very much part of this thing the movie did, which again prefigured like a Bush era convention, which was like, look, aren't all these Southerners funny? Look at all these hicks and hillbillies.
Yeah,
isn't it? These are the people that come from the South. There's all these wacky characters who wear cowboy hats and they love ribs and they yeehaw and that kind of thing, which was basically like one of the, at least from my memory, one of the chief liberal criticisms of Bush is that he was a cowboy and a hick instead of being a very pampered and dangerous man.
Yeah.
Well, I also want to just point out too, like the thing that drove me nuts is like she was in a very loving relationship with I don't remember the character's name, but she was on Chicago Hope as Lisa Katera, and I remember that distinctly because I looked it up, and right around the time she showed up on Chicago Hope, there were these Cadillac Katera commercials, which always would end with Lisa Katera, and somebody would go, "Who's Lisa Katera?" So her name was a joke on Chicago Hope, and then the actress is in this movie.
Wow.
And so like that's like burnt into me. So I'm just going to refer to her as Lisa Katera. That's not the character's name. That's not the actress.
Colors lore.
Andy's full of stuff like that. Andy always has something where I'm like, how the hell?
But like they had this stable relationship through a good chunk of the movie, and like why would she kill herself if she has somebody to come home to?
Right.
They didn't quite answer that either.
It is a very sort of histrionic, storyline because this is a political operative, I guess, who's been in politics since the 60s and 70s, and well, I guess spoiler alert, but they get a piece of dirt on an opponent, and she finds the dirt but doesn't want to release it. It's against her scruples, and she feels very strongly about that, and sort of ultimately she kills herself, and the message we're kind of left with is the ends justify the means, which is, I don't know, I think that's sometimes can be true, but again, what are the ends, right? What are these great things that Jack Stanton is going to do as president? Because I do think that, like, that's could be one of the criticisms of Bernie Sanders, perhaps, that he didn't go negative enough on his opponents, but there's at least a point to going to him running, other than just me. I'm good and I will do good things.
Well, even Larry Hagman's character, I mean, he is set up as the kind of the anti-Stanton because he's a decent man, and he's really the guy that the country should have as president. But again, what is Hagman? What does he want to do beyond just sort of be a good guy in the White House? It's not really explained.
To talk quietly.
What's that? Sorry.
He wants to talk quietly.
That scene kind of weirded me out too. I was like, "What are they going for here, man?"
He does that big speech where he it's after he kind of outmaneuvers Stanton by donating blood to the governor who had a haircut, the heart attack. Sorry. It would be funny if he donated to him after he got a haircut, but and
hair to him, maybe.
Yeah. And he does that big speech, and he says, he does. It's meant to be a moving moment. The music's swelling. I think you're really meant to invest in it. He's talking about how it's such a shame that the media focuses on garbage, and he doesn't want to. He genuinely does not want to wallow in personal attacks and that kind of thing. And you believe him, and you're meant to think this is good, and you're meant to think what a shame it is that instead of talking about the issues or that good men are destroyed by scurrilous scandal. But then what does he pivot to? After he says it's time to leave behind this kind of this muck and dirt in politics, he says, I want to go around the country and have a conversation with the American people. So there's nothing. There's absolutely no vision. He wants to get rid of all the dirty politics so that he can travel around and listen to people to figure out what actually has to be done in the country.
He's dialectical.
You want to talk about ideas, man? Ideas.
That's right.
And we also have a comment here. What about the character who keeps taking John Travolta on plane trips and then years later mysteriously kills himself in jail? Oh boy, I'm in a hot seat there. Yeah. I don't know about that, Kathy. Oh boy. Alan Alda as president in Canadian Bacon, classic. Oh my god.
Well, I will say he's great. He's like this bumbling moron. I love it.
Yeah.
This is what I was referring to in my initial comment, which is I remember when I first watched this movie, and I can't remember when it was. It was way later than when it came out. I think it was sometime in the 2010s, and even then, the movie does this thing where it's kind of a little bit ambiguous, and it kind of plays with your uncertainty about what to think of Stanton, where it's kind of like, okay, he very clearly sleeps with Elson Janney at the start of the movie, so you kind of have an inkling that he's a horn dog. Yeah, right in the campaign headquarters and like a room right next to it. But okay, so that sort of sets it up. But then the movie kind of plays with your expectations a little bit, and it kind of suggests that, hey, maybe Stanton isn't the character that you think he is, and maybe he is being set up. And I remember when I first watched the movie, I was genuinely kind of thinking, is what exactly is this going to? How's this going to go? But then when you watch the movie in 2021, with everything we know about Clinton, not just everything that we know that he did while he was president and while he was governor, but then also all the Epstein stuff and so much else, you sort of that ambiguity, I think, is completely gone. Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of, I know that may be lost to people who maybe see this movie for the first time in the the post-Trump era. I don't know, or the post-Epstein era.
Right. It was very much, and this I think goes back to maybe the contrast between him and his opponent. Bill Clinton and I wouldn't call him the first celebrity president because of course there's Reagan right before him, but he was. Very much a phenomenon in terms of people were obsessed with talking about his personal life and all this aesthetic stuff, and of course his sex life, in a way that I think was kind of unprecedented. Right? We're hearing about the president's penis on the news every night. Like that hadn't really happened before that. And Picker is kind of the antithesis of that. He's like, no, this is not the model for the presidency. We're supposed to be sort of at a remove and, and kept in private. But I think that's an interesting sort of idea, especially for the 90s, because I remember Christopher Hitchens saying before post 9/11 Hitchens, but he was making a point that Bill Clinton, you could trace, you could draw a line between when he would have a sex scandal and when he would bomb another country. So around the time that I think in Khartoum, Sudan, the pharmaceutical factory, he blew up, killed a bunch of innocent people. That was when the Lewinsky scandal was starting to break. And on with Bosnia and all this stuff happens to coincide. I mean, maybe that thesis is a little stretching a little bit, but it is interesting how much the 90s politically was about psychosexual drama and how it sort of played into our ideas about how to be, sort of a more sensitive empire, global hegemony, right? We're looking out for human rights now, but it's still all the same shit.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, another thing that I was thinking was watching this is again, watching this in the post-Trump era, the post-2016 era, where Matt Gaetz is accused of trafficking a teenager, and Trump has been accused of assault by dozens of women, and all the so many of these scandals, and things are so crazy now, and it really is when you watch this movie. I mean, obviously the thing that Stanton does is awful, but the whole thing almost feels quaint, watching it from today's era. And I don't know if that would have been like that in 1998. I can't say because I didn't watch this movie when I was a kid, but I have a feeling that this movie, when it came out, before we got used to a lot of movies and shows that kind of portrayed politics as this very cynical and grubby enterprise and full of kind of incompetence and idiots like Veep and the rest. I feel like this movie would have been more shocking and salacious for people. As you say, we're talking about the president's dick, and so you get to see Clinton acting as this horny moron for 2 hours or so. But I don't know. What was your guys' sense of when I don't know when you first watched it, but did you get that feeling as well?
Andy, you first.
I know. This was my first time watching it. So I had, like I said before, I kind of avoided this movie. But I was really surprised that they had was it Andrew Cuomo in it?
Right.
Or in an analog for him, because the governor from New York was obviously supposed to be Mario Cuomo, who ran a little bit in 92. And I'm just surprised, like him and Andrew didn't, like, after they finished their ribs, they just start, being gross and sexual and just being like, what? He's Italian. What are we supposed to do?
That's those stereotypes they're talking about, man.
I was expecting, well, that was his defense too. Andrew Cuomo's defense of, was like, I wasn't sexually harassing women. I'm Italian. Like, what does that mean? You get stuck in drains? I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely felt that ambiguity when I first watched it. I would have been 13, and this is like around the time I was first sort of getting interested in politics, around the 2004 election. And I became sort of fascinated with Bill Clinton, because that was the last time at that point a Democrat had won. Yeah, I remember, you do feel a little conflict about, obviously it's bad to cheat on your wife, and the teenage thing is pretty gross, but I think a lot of it would redound to, and I feel like a lot of liberals still feel this way, it's a Republican conspiracy, right? I think Hillary Clinton said that at one point. There's a vast right-wing conspiracy against my husband. And so for whatever misdeeds Bill Clinton had and has, that can kind of be washed away by rationalizing they want to get him because he's so good, that they're exaggerating this stuff and they're hypocrites, which is true, but that doesn't excuse his predatory behavior.
Yeah, I mean, they don't mention it right at first. It's not until a bit later that we find out that the character that he's impregnated or allegedly is 17 years old. And I feel like it says something about the 90s that doesn't like hit harder. You know what I mean? Like, I guess as it would today. I guess
so I missed
not in all circles does it hit so hard, but you know what I mean? But with Clinton, looking back now with everything we know and just how cold the culture has moved on with Me Too and all of that, just the dynamic between Clinton and Lewinsky. She was 24 years old. He's president of the United States. Like people are anecdotally, people are very quick to just be like, whatever, they were two consenting adults, leave it alone. And it's like, he was the president of the United States and she was an intern in his office. Like, you telling me he wasn't grooming her? You telling me he wasn't like, come on, like there's all this shit going on. And he's just that kind of guy. He's a predator. He's a fucking predator. You know, he's a sexual predator. And he had these allegations before. He ever got to the White. He's literally being investigated for allegations when he's fooling around with Lewinsky.
Am I remembering it right that they, in the movie, don't they leave it kind of ambiguous as to whether or not he actually had sex with her?
Yeah. They never say for sure.
Okay.
But it's just one of those things where he doesn't deny, or the character obviously is like, shit, he's all upset. Like he probably did impregnate her, right. But you know what I mean? Cause he probably would that's where that character, I think, does reach that full, what we know today as sociopathic Bill Clinton, sexual predator Bill Clinton, though I don't think the writers knew it or whoever that it hit that way at the time, because even then it was like, the big scandal was in the whole thing in the movie was the tapes from that one girl who's, they just depict her as like the dumb blonde, which is still very 90s or more 80s even. But then like the scandal of him impregnating a teenager is just kind of like, nah, it's like, it's just not even treated as seriously in the film as like a grave, it's just one of these other lies they're telling about.
Well, yeah, and crucially, I think that woman is meant to, I mean, the way that they film it, it even looks like the Jennifer Flowers press conference. And so it's clearly meant to be that. And the movie makes the outright case. You could say that, it's a fictionalized version, so it's not really about an event, but it's so intentionally shot to look like it that, you can't help but believe there's a comment on the real event. And they make the case that, well, this is bullshit.
They made it a literal hoax.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then when you think about very early on, just before that, there is a reference to Anita Hill. And I mean, look, again, I don't know what exactly the movie was trying to do. It could have just been mentioning Anita Hill as a well-known sex scandal at the time. But to some extent, the takeaway also is that, Anita Hill kind of was herself, maybe not completely on the level, and someone who was one of these people who cropped up to try and derail someone's political career.
Right. That was a big trope back then, from both parties to kind of portray women as attention getters or having nefarious motivations behind coming out with allegations. But this sort of goes back to the point earlier about how this movie is kind of not sure what it is. It's kind of in the middle area tonally and in terms of the characters, and that kind of makes me think it would have been a better movie perhaps if they'd leaned into evil Bill Clinton, right? Like the psycho we all know that he is. That's why I've always thought Oliver Stone, his next movie should be a Clinton biopic, because he's done a few other presidents.
Ooh, yeah.
That's a great idea.
I'm not crazy about his W, but we could just go back and re-edit this with an internal monologue. Like, oh boy, look at those splashy pastels there on that blouse. I want to rip into it. Oh my goodness.
Because, I mean, the movie is, again, the main character is someone deciding how they feel about Bill Clinton. And
Holy shit.
The conclusion is like, instead, if they're just like, this wasn't worth it. I've completely sold my soul. Everything this guy touches turns to shit. Like, I think that'd be a more compelling film. But I don't think they could have made that in 90s Hollywood.
They barely scratched at that, and that would have in that way. The fact that this movie is like has the meta commentary of the main character like accepting Bill Clinton for the shitbag he is, and giving up on that, on having hope or whatever it is he's trying to cling to, then this film is a very sophisticated piece of dark magic and propaganda. And I'm a little disturbed that we're still talking about it. Actually, now that
I don't know how much time we have left, but I don't know if we can talk about very quickly the portrayal of Hillary Clinton. In this movie,
yes, we absolutely.
That is
Thank you, Branko.
Fantastic 90s artifact, because it really is a reflection of what people thought about Hillary Clinton, probably really until she ran for president in 2015 and 2016, which is that she was the brains behind the operation. She was the serious, ultra capable, very smart, very fiercely intelligent, ambitious, and frustrated woman. Which is all of that is true to there's elements of that's true about Hillary Clinton. But it's funny because I think now when we think of Hillary Clinton, we don't have quite that image of her. We think of her as kind of bumbling and
nefarious.
Stubborn, nefarious. That's right.
I was gonna say she's a sympathetic character, but having 2016 in mind, you don't. I don't have much sympathy for this character. When, I remember, I think at one of these moments where they give her a close up, where I was like, "Well, you're responsible for one of the worst fucking fiascos in political history." But I mean, do you guys think it was an overall like more sympathetic to her depiction? Was the movie with her? I'm with her. The movie's with her.
I'll say this: I felt like it was, and I think that was kind of the point, which is that she's kind of presented as the, if not the moral center, at least kind of one of the anchor of decency in the Stanton marriage / political partnership. Mm-hmm. And the fact that by the end she has decided to go to the dark side and to do this thing, to release this scurrilous information and to stick with Stanton despite the potentially horrible things he's done. It's kind of, she is meant to illustrate what the movie is trying to tell us about how politics corrupts people, which is that even if even she can be turned into a monster, then anyone can. Which for me, I tend to think of, I think politics can corrupt people, but I think also it attracts a certain type of personality also. And I think, that's the case with Clinton. And I think both Clintons actually, is that they were people whose personalities were uniquely suited to this. Not so much that they start out as preternaturally good people and went bad.
Mm-hmm. They're of their time and their place for sure.
Right.
Interesting.
So Anders, you're the one who suggested this movie in the first place, and I never asked you why. So I think this is probably, I'm going to put you on the spot, man. This is probably a good chance to ask us, why is, I mean, there's a lot of reasons I can see, but like, why did you want us to watch this movie?
Now listen, Anders, there was a reason for this. What's the reason? I feel you, Anders.
I think if I remember correctly, you said a movie that is about something you know a lot about, and I have too much information about Bill Clinton in my brain and politics in the 90s. So I think that was what it was.
Okay, that sounds right.
Well, no, but that's really interesting. Like, Anders, what fascinated you with Clinton as a character? Because that's what this film is. A lot of it is examining Clinton as a character, like boiling him down to a character.
I mean, the reason like I was saying, I when I was a teenager, early teens, I started getting slightly into Bill Clinton. Then I read more and more about it, and because I think I feel like the best way to understand your moment in history is to look 10 years before, because we tend to look 20, 30, 40 years, and a lot of the answers are about 10 years. That often gets overlooked, I've found, is the previous decade. And it was very interesting to, as a teenager in the Bush era, to be looking at this, because it was almost like a completely different world, because 9/11 changed so much culturally, politically. So it was like looking at this odd sort of bizarro world, the 90s, where a lot of things were similar, but so many, just on a base level were very different. And yeah, I think that sort of set me on the path to becoming a socialist, just actually learning what Bill Clinton did as president, which often gets overlooked as well.
Well, and do you feel this film depicted in any way triangulation?
Yeah,
because that was vital to Clinton taking power in the midst of this like conservative domination.
Yeah, I think, as Branko said earlier, that scene, especially the debate where he's accused of trying to be for everything, right? He's taking different parts of the triangle, doing the triangulation like his buddy Dick Morris suggested. But there's actually something I wanted to make sure I mentioned about Joe Klein, who wrote the book that this is based on. He's a pundit, very, pretty shitty Beltway, run-of-the-mill guy. But he made a point. I was looking up his, old C-SPAN videos, and he was talking about how when Bill Clinton first ran, and the election that this is based on, in 1992, he was running to have a service corps, and I think eventually this turned into AmeriCorps. It was a way. It would have been a way for students to pay off their debt, to do something, to volunteer in their community or something.
Yeah.
And to teach, especially. And he was asked at the time, well, isn't that going to be a problem with public employee unions? Is that they are going to have people coming in and working for free, basically? That's going to undermine the union. And Bill Clinton at the time was like, oh, we're going to find some way to figure that out. And that's kind of what they did with AmeriCorps. But Joe Klein was saying that he wanted to do the opposite, that he thinks America would be better off. He was giving this big speech about how the big problem, and this is in like 96, 98, big problem in America is we don't know what to do with our affluence, which of course was a common refrain in the 90s. And he was saying that we need to do the opposite, in that it needs to be like mandatory service, and with the intention of busting public employee unions. So we should just have 1,000 Teach for America programs with the express intention of completely undermining public employees. And he said that public employee unions were a 30 to 40 year experiment, and that experiment has failed. And that was his big takeaway from 6 to 8 years of Bill Clinton.
Wow.
So he's basically Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
Because he had that mandatory service plan that was kind of horrific.
Right.
Like a lot of his plans, but he was gay, so everybody related to him.
There you go. I did one. Andy, you said you were watching like Bill Clinton speeches earlier today. I did you one even worse, and I watched Clinton Foundation content. Wow. And this is it. And it really struck me. I watched it like not just after watching the movie, and it struck me like how similar in tone they were. Like the kind of the music sounded like similar in some ways. And I do feel like there's some time capsule. The movie itself is a time capsule for the 90s. Also, in just like the length of the movie, it's bogged down in the middle. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of extra scenes. It's very typical of the 90s. Like, oh, this is an important movie we're making. Everybody's gonna want to see this. It's like sure. This content here. It really is weird just how kind of gee golly gosh, apple pie dimple cheeks. Like I can't remember if in one of these, somewhere he says build back better. He
Really?
uses the exact terminology. And I believe, I know I've seen footage of Clinton and Reagan say "Make America Great Again," before Trump ever came in. That one was around, but yeah, he literally says somewhere in here "Build Back Better." I mean, where do you? I would love to hear what each of you think, Branko and Anders, and Andy, of course. I care what Andy thinks, but our guests, of course, like. How do you see Biden in relation to Clinton world and the Clinton dynasty? Like, did Biden ever have strong connections with that? I mean, was he always just part of it by proxy? Or
I feel like I read a book about this. I don't know if Branko has heard about this at all.
Yeah, last week's gentleman, I believe. No, well, Biden was kind of he was one of the proto Clintons. That was what he was running on when he ran in 87. He was trying to do the Kennedy thing, basically just run on inspirational speeches and talk about generational change and that kind of thing. But then whenever he talked about actual policy, it was always about the need to crack down on the special interests, which is not, lobbyists, corporate lobbyists, and big wealthy people and the American elite, but rather it was African Americans or Latinos or poor people or gay people. That was what was special interests in the nomenclature of the Biden type. So he kind of paved the way in some ways for Clinton, even if he spiraled into an inferno in his campaign. And in 92, Biden was kind of in there. He was a very senior Democrat, so he was doing things with the administration. He was one of the people that was involved in the welfare reform, of course, and you can also, obviously, the crime bill, which was a major Clinton initiative, and of course now is kind of synonymous with Biden. One interesting tidbit from that era is that when Clinton was trying to get his healthcare reform off the ground, in the Clinton Presidential Library, they actually have it all online. They have these little files for every single congressperson. So, what their particular concerns are, how they might be able to be persuaded to sign on, that kind of thing. Biden was one of the holdouts, and they note that Biden is he's not sure about universal health care, and it may well be that depending on what DuPont does, he may change his mind, because DuPont at the time was kind of supporting universal health care. But in the end, Biden did not really sign on. And it probably had to do with the fact that he was getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from health insurers. So that's sort of, there's a little bit of, I guess, Biden history in this period and what he was actually up to with the Clintons. And
you all heard that straight from the man, the author of Yesterday's Man. And don't buy it on Amazon, but I just wanted to bring the link up. But thank you for that, Branko. That's awesome. And man, what a great cover image for your book, just got to say.
Yeah, I mean, I had nothing to do with it, so I cannot claim credit. But the designers at Jacobin know what they're doing. That's one of the quiet keys to the success of the magazine.
Yeah,
because that's done through Verso too, which I think they're having a big sale this month. So go to Verso's website if they still are. You can get like 40% off if I remember correctly. But that ends in a few days. So, there you go. There's your plug. I got it for you.
I did not tell anyone to do this. I just want to note for the audience.
No.
What did you say? Verso Books? Use the coupon code Slick Willie. Sorry.
Yeah, I believe you get an extra 10% off if you order it while doing a Clinton accent. So.
Nice.
That's a great thing. I think if I remember back to my childhood, that might have been like the first time I remember like making adults laugh was like doing a Clinton impression, And I think what's that movie? There's a screwball movie, Mafia. It's such a funny.
Lloyd Bridges, right?
Yes, with
Yeah.
Lloyd Bridges, such a funny screwball comedy. And there's one scene where they're doing like something, they put a Clinton thing in, and he goes, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky, though I am wearing her underwear." And so I remember repeating that, and adults would just bust out laughing, like, "This kid's funny." So I realized early on, you do a good Bill Clinton impression. People appreciate that. But again, mine is still better than than John Travolta's. But I don't know. Anything else y'all can think to add about this strange adventure we went on? It really was, because I was born in '89, so the '90s is my childhood. Yeah, and then I really came to political. I was in junior high when 9/11 happened. So Bill Clinton was always like my childhood president. And then it is like, but you knew he was controversial. You knew he was up to no good. You knew there was a lot of weird shit going on. But it's not until you get older that you appreciate the policy. You appreciate, the outcomes of shit that he did, mass incarceration and, welfare reform, NAFTA. You know what I mean? Like I've been watching a lot of, it's because I just transferred to get a history degree, finally getting my bachelor's, and we're actually going over a lot of this stuff in foreign policy right now. For some reason, the teacher's going backwards. So we started with War on Terror. Now we're in the '90s. I was watching old C-SPAN of Hitchens, and you mentioned him earlier, the Pat Buchanan on C-SPAN. They're talking about Bosnia and just all that shit, and it's crazy to look back on it now, but also crazy to see that after all this time of Clinton, nearing the end of his presidency, in the middle of his second term, the biggest critique this show has of him is like, what a horn dog. that this film made of him was like, he just can't keep it in his pants, right? There was nothing else there, really.
I think it too. One of the things I want to make sure we hit on is the absolute absence of the Republican Party in this movie. That
gets mentioned once or twice.
I mean, but in 1992, that was after 12 years of Reagan Bush, and we were in a recession at the time. And this is kind of important because if you go back and actually watch all the campaign ads, that's what everybody's trying to address. Bush is like, well, I haven't had a chance to fix it yet. I'm sorry, guys, I'm working on it. And everybody else, like Clinton's, at times sounding like Bernie Sanders and at times sounding like Donald Trump in a way, with his rhetoric. So it's
I know a few people who are into that, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, the Nazballs out there.
Yeah.
Shout out to them. No shout out. But
hey, listen, how do you think we're going to appeal to a wide, broad range of people if you can't sprinkle in a little neo-Nazi with your Medicare for all? You know what I'm saying, buddy? Come on now. Keep it real. Sorry, this is bad. Oh, God.
And I mean, and I'm talking specifically of talking points, not any actions or anything like that with with these speeches, because they all were very empty rhetoric. A lot of them sounded very similar. I know, literally Pat Buchanan's up there, America first. That was one of his things he was saying. It's like, I'll tell you what America first means, and David Duke was also running.
You're talking about the convention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because Pat Buchanan primaried Buchanan and David Duke primaried Bush. And
I remember on that C-SPAN I just mentioned, somebody asked Pat Buchanan, do you regret your convention speech? And he's like, I thought it was the right speech for the right moment. And but
culture wars, right?
Yeah. And but I mean, he stuck to his guns on that shit, and we know who's ended up happier in the end, or at least he is now.
And
I
think
too,
that set a tone for the election for the Republicans, because the next night, Potato Guy came out, and Dan Quayle, and he was railing against Murphy Brown. So you have this very mean Republican Party.
Oh yeah,
if in this election truly was about personalities, which I think this film got right, but they didn't look at it like how like Bill Clinton's kind of sitting there being kind of folksy and relatable, and he was relatable in a lot of his speeches, and the way he spoke to people, there was a debate with him, Ross Perot, and Bush. And this woman gets up there, starts asking a question. First thing Bush does is checks his watch as she starts talking.
Right.
Which not good body language. Like he's not interested in what she has to say. He answered the question fine. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna rail on him with that. And then Perot comes in, and Perot kind of got in it with her a little bit, but like I think again it was absolutely fine. But then Bill Clinton kind of like walks over to her and like kind of leans in and really pretends like I'm listening to you and I'm hearing exactly what you're, and just it was more effective, even though he really didn't say anything. And that was the one of the things this movie actually captured well. But I kind of wonder why they didn't address the Republican Party and that mood of after 12 years of Republican rule, being in a recession, it was time for change.
I think the main character mentions it, like all he says is like it could either be like this guy who is admitting a liar or a nut job. Like that's about it. Like they very typical Democrat, just entirely dismiss them as just the nut jobs. You know what I mean? That's all I remember. But you're right. I mean, but is that because the Democrats have so by this time thoroughly dissolved into being just Republican light? You know what I mean? Republican, but not so nutty that any distinction within the plot. I mean, it is called primary colors too. It's about a primary.
I think I mean in the book I believe is about the primary too, and I think because 92 was such a fabled presidential primary, because that was really when Clinton was supposedly at his lowest low and made this triumphant comeback. So my guess would be there's just a lot already with the primary. To extend it to the general election would have been a 4-hour movie.
I mean, I think it does capture that end of history feeling where the sense you get from the movie is that basically everything's fine. That there are some people who have lost their jobs, but they'll be fine because they can just go back to school and get higher diplomas and they'll be okay. There's not really any sort of crisis or anything, which of course is I think that's how a lot of people felt in the 90s. Now when we look back on it, we realize it was this decade of pretty massive displacement and basically the kind of finishing off point of what Reagan started. Clinton managed to do a lot of the stuff that Reagan wanted to do but wasn't able to. But I think it took a long while for us to kind of be able to look at it that way. I think what you're saying about the folks and personalities and everything. I mean, it's funny because I think there was a real palpable shift, at least from my point of view, in like 2015, 2016, in that whole presidential race, where suddenly political reporting did start to really talk about policy and start to talk about things that people had done instead of just, well, this person fell over on camera and that's going to be bad for them in New Hampshire, or this person said this thing and that's not going to look good. There was this real, the crime bill, really up until that point, not to shoehorn Biden into this again, but when I researched that book, I realized that for really until about 2015, the crime bill was always cited really positively by reporters. It was the greatest accomplishment of Biden's career. It was one of Clinton's top accomplishments, and not really because of the substance, but just because it was this big thing that they managed to pass, and that was really the only thing that was important. And then it was only really around 2015, 2016 that people started to go, wait, hold on, well, what did this bill actually do? And in fact, what did any of these people do? Because it wasn't that great.
One of the things in that Clinton Foundation video was put 100,000 new police on the streets of America. I'm like, yeah, wow, awesome. But talk about like the party getting, I don't know, getting out from under itself in that way. You know what I mean? Where those things are now liabilities, at least for a lot of voters in this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people. I know there's this moment now where the press are trying to get us to be terrified of crime, and that supposedly we've gone back to like the '60s or something. But even so, even with this kind of attempt to, I guess, shift the momentum for where it was heading through 2020 with the George Floyd protests, I don't think anyone would ever Biden he's put more money into crime, into crime fighting, into police and that kind of thing. But it's not something that he really trumpets majorly. It's something he's doing quietly, and I think he's doing it for some political gain, but not to the point where he will, try and constantly boast about it, because I think people have realized the politics of this have changed, even as they are trying to get us to get scared of crime all over again.
Right.
Yeah, well, gentlemen, a lot of things change, right? Look at this.
Oh,
things change.
Oh.
Times change.
Which, I was just thinking, Biden too, a good example of Biden putting money into law enforcement is like what he's doing on the border. He's kind of continuing Trump's, policies of keeping people out. And I literally just got in a fight with a neighbor. Like, I live in an apartment building, so it's not like, I don't run into these people regularly. But who's like, oh, all immigrants are diseased, and that's like literally what Jen Psaki was saying. Defending Biden's policies on it. Right before she said we banned the horses. Because that's what Title 42 is all about.
Yes.
So,
discussing that they haven't pulled that back.
No, and it's also discussing that they haven't deported one horse. If they're going to ban the horses, just throw them out of the country.
Ban the horses.
But I think we can all agree, actually, in all seriousness, that when we abolish ICE, we will have a border rescue force who probably will be riding horses at some point.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on this image, Anders?
I mean, that's a big part of 2016 for me was those primaries was reposting the Clintons and Trump, which I don't know. I mean, I'm obviously not a campaign consultant, not qualified to be one, but I don't know why Bernie didn't hit that harder, the Trump-Clinton connection.
Yeah.
People forget Clinton phoned up Trump. Bill Clinton phoned up Trump during the campaign, during the primaries, to give him advice. And then this was a story for maybe a day or a week, and then it just was completely forgotten.
Bill called Donald.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it was
to run. Yeah.
Jeez.
I think it was part of that whole, the Pied Piper theory, right? Where the Clinton campaign was saying, what's that? I'm sorry.
Clinton thought she could defeat Trump, even though the polls said the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. Let's raise up this kind of outlandish character because, obviously he can never win. I mean, he's such a clown and a buffoon. How could we possibly lose to him? So if we make him the Republican nominee, we're golden. And I mean,
this worked once.
Jeb has got weak knees. Go for the knees, Donnie.
Someone needs to make a movie about Jeb. I think that would be a really
man. And with him being like CVS calling the tow company because he locked his keys in the car.
Yeah,
which happened recently.
It would be a very different movie to Primary Colors because it would be one of real pathos. Jeb was a tragic figure. The son who should have been president. The one who took it seriously was his younger brother was the goofball, and in the end became this kind of national joke. I don't think anyone remembers Jeb as the governor of Florida anymore. I think people just remember him as that guy whose campaign slogan was his name with an exclamation point.
Right, he was a distinguished statesman. He helped steal an election, for crying out loud.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, he's remembered for.
He did January 6th before. Before Trump.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Trump was basically at reruns at that point, so of course he's going to repeat January. The Brooks Brothers riot. Like we've seen this before. Come on! I liked it better when you weren't in repeats. Let's get a new season of Trump.
Well, this is the thing with movies now is everything is a remake or a reboot, and it's politics too. So.
So you guys mentioned American Crime Story earlier. I haven't started watching it, but it depicts this moment in history, right?
Yeah, the new one is
Wow,
about
man.
the impeachment.
Wow, very cool. Got to check that out. Could have been about Whitewater, but whatever.
Well, that comes up too.
All right, good. Whoa, I zoomed in way too much. I don't know what
For a
happened.
second, I thought you were enhancing to reveal some clue that was in the window.
Oh boy,
Steven
look at these!
on the
Oh, look at
flag.
these two strapping gentlemen. I'm on Bill Clinton Wikipedia page. And there's some imagery here that is
Well,
a bit much.
HW and Clinton became good friends after Clinton left office.
Right.
They talked about it, and also if we remember, HW Bush also another sexual predator. Loved groping women while in wheelchair bound. I mean, the dude. If you're doing that when you're like in your 80s, that that does not bode well for what was happening earlier on in your career.
Yeah.
Jeez. God damn.
Yeah.
HW, man. I so much of this stuff is tripping me out because I am literally covering this in my classes. Like I actually sat and read the entire Fukuyama end of history. Oof. And I'm just like, yeah, exactly. I was just like, oh my God, it's this bad. It's really this bad. For a guy who's declaring victory over Marx, he does quite a lot of appealing to Marx throughout the thing. But and this film definitely has that. I'm glad you brought that up earlier, Branko. The end of history vibe to it is like, yeah, you couldn't pick a single like, they don't mention the opposition party. It's all just very contained. It's all all of these scandals involve people. Like, it's weird. The sex scandal involves people that they know that we've met already. You know what I mean? It's all just like very contained with a nice little bow. Evil Yoda's usual has got the gems in the in the chat already. And then guess what? I have to chase the Fukuyama is Samantha Power. So that's what I'm sitting with. And Jesus Christ, is that shit hard to read? It's just hard to sit through.
I know Besker's always talking about those two whenever he's talking, and at some point he's going to be on the show, and we'll have to pick the right thing for him to be picking apart. That'll be horrifying, whatever that is going to be.
Black Hawk Down.
Where can well, we hope to have you both back on again for another movie. Hopefully, a little less nails on chalkboard than this one, or as close to home. But tell folks where can they find you. Go ahead, Anders.
At Anders Lee here, just like it says in the lower thirds there on Twitter. I'm Dursley1 on Instagram, Pod Damn America, wherever you got podcasts, and Redacted Tonight is mostly on YouTube. And there's an app you can download too, portable.tv.
Cool.
And you can find me at Jacobin, where there's a lot of great, talented writers that I think everyone should be reading. And also in These Times, a Chicago-based magazine, which is really fantastic, which everyone should read. And I guess there you got my handle down there, so you can find me on Twitter, where I'll be thinking out loud.
Very cool, very cool. And Andy, what? I should mention, we're very grateful. This stream also went out on movie night extravaganza. Thank you, Forrest, for that. Andy, do you guys have any shows coming up on that one?
Yeah, we got tomorrow night. We're doing Naked Gun 2.5. We were initially going to be doing it with Natalie Shore. She backed out because of personal reasons, like last minute. Anders, like a hero, stepped in on that episode. So thank you, Anders. But we're finally going to get to hear her speak about it. And apparently, according to her, she actually likes 2.5 better than the first one. So this will be interesting to hear her take on it. So I'm kind of glad we get to watch that together. Then on Tuesday, our normal night of shows, we're doing Psycho. We're going to start doing horror movies for the month of October. And it looks like we're kind of tracing the history of slasher films. We're still kind of forming the list there. Couple other things. We have the You can still get onto the Kickstarter for Duretti, Shadow of the People, which is a comic book series about Bella something Duretti. He's a Spanish anarchist who led a massive uprising and basically held a city for 3 years against the fascists. Compelling story, from this is like tracing his life. And I did an incentive cover, so you might want to go over to Kickstarter, look out Giroudi, Shadow of the People, for that. And of course, Ben Burgess's book about Hitchens is coming out in December. So I did the cover to that. So look for
Great
those.
cover, by the way.
Fantastic cover,
Thank
yeah,
you.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Ben shared like his rough of like the first chapter, or maybe even just the opening of it, and it was like a take my money moment. You know what I mean? I think he compared Bernie to Doc Brown in the opening of it. So I was like, hell yeah, I'm here for this. I tried to invite Forrest on to crash the stream like midstream to join us, but he's like, I'm sorry, man, I'm really busy. I got to edit this and I got to watch, what'd you say, Naked Gun 2.5 or whatever. I was like, oh, excuse me. Like hard work. But this has been a lot of fun. Thanks again to Anders Lee and Branko Marcetic, right?
That was it.
Marcetic, very good. Thank you. Yeah, I tried, man. I'm easy. I have a 2-syllable name, Joe Payne. It's very hard. People will say the full name because of that. But appreciate all y'all being here, and thanks again. We'll see you on the next Bad Takes.
Which I hope should be finally Wolf Warrior 2, which we've been teasing with
the big one.
We got
the big one.
Another person whose name we're going to struggle with. Kuba Wynarski, I believe is how to pronounce it. If I didn't get that right, I apologize, Kuba. Summer Tan and the amazing Milton Alamati. We will be discussing the Chinese propaganda film Wolf Warrior 2.
Interesting.
Oh my goodness.
Wasn't that, I believe,
my show,
one of the highest grossing movies of all time, right?
For real?
No,
yeah, I believe so.
Not of all time, of the year. Of the year it came out.
Oh, okay, right.
It was in the top 10, and it beat a couple superhero movies.
For some, that was a bar trivia question, and it just stuck in my mind for some reason. I haven't thought of Wolf Warrior 2 since that. 2017,
it was like the 6th biggest movie of the world, and it didn't even play well in the States. So, but that's still incredible. It was mostly like Chinese people, the Chinese cinema that did that, which it is absolutely incredible that their economy can do that and rival. I think they beat Wonder Woman, if I remember correctly. I'm doing this from memory, so don't quote me on the Wonder Woman part. Maybe it was Deadpool. It was like one of those, big superhero movies. But it's something else. I've watched this movie several times now, 3-4 times. I can't believe I watched it.
Oh my gosh. So many of these this is the first time where Andy's seen the movie for the first time and I am more familiar with it, because usually I'm coming into a lot of these fresh and I'm like the fresh take on it. But also I do my show Political Pain usually on Fridays. I've been neglecting it because I just started school, but hopefully I'll be back to it this Friday, usually around 7:30 p.m. That's Pacific time. I do local journalism. I'm a journalist, longtime print journalist here in this valley, Santa Maria, Central Coast of California. So I do some local stuff. We just had a local police department kill an innocent bystander who was literally just sitting in his car nearby when they went after a guy on a warrant and ended up opening fire and killing an innocent man. So talking about all kinds of just weird, fucked up shit that's going on in my area. And then also, talk national stuff as well. But again, thanks everybody. I'm going to shut all our little videos off really quick so we can I always feel bad. We're on top of Andy's beautiful artwork, and I just want to let it run for a good, maybe 20, 30 seconds so everybody can get a good look at the artwork. But thanks again, everybody, for being here. This has been Bad Takes episode 5 on Primary Colors. Thanks again to our guests and Andy. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.